Perfect. Thank you so much, Suzanne. Welcome back, everybody. And I am going to call to order the January 28th meeting of the Academic Affairs and Educational Attainment Committee. This is a virtual meeting, so please everybody speak clearly. And the live stream is available of the public meeting on youtube.com and at the ABOR Live link. Today, the committee is going to have a discussion with ASU regarding its institutional university metrics. And in November, the board approved the fiscal year 2020 financial aid report. Today, we'll have the opportunity to discuss with the universities their current financial aid strategies. And finally, we will hear a request for a new academic program from the University of Arizona. We will try to make up a little bit of time. We were scheduled to end this meeting at noon, and we will do our best to make up a little bit of time for us also. We can have a lunch break. Our first order of business at this point is to approve the minutes from the November 5th, 2020 committee meeting. Are there any questions or comments regarding those minutes? Seeing none, I move that the committee approve the minutes from the November 5th, 2020 Academic Affairs and Educational Attainment Committee meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. So I'd like to move on right now to the discussion with ASU regarding the institution's enterprise-wide performance metrics and strategic forecast measures. Rich Stanley, I believe, is with us from ASU to present. Rich, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Regent Manson. We have been working with the board staff and with a couple of the regents and recently on identifying what are appropriate institutional metrics for ASU that are more exclusive to ASU than not across the board metrics. Mm-hmm. And I think. While it's clear, everybody knows ASU has a lot of priorities and a lot of initiatives going on. The selection of institutional metrics sort of has to, as a result of that, probably be something of a sample of what those things are. And I think that the conversations have led us to a collection of them that represent what ASU is up to, but clearly it is not a picture of everything that's going on at ASU. And I don't think that's really possible in a set of metrics. Some of the metrics that have been identified have a degree of overlap with things that NAU and U of A are working on. And I'll talk about those as we get to them. But I think that others of them are more at least have been identified by ASU as priorities. When we talk about specific areas of concentration, this becomes somewhat more complex, I think, to talk about than just simply the kind of scale metrics that we have in the larger overall metrics, numbers of degrees, numbers of students, those kinds of things, because we're talking about larger initiatives that have many different have layers to them, and so we've tried to find numerical measures, but I don't think any set of numerical measures will ever give a full picture of what's going on in things like engineering or our interdisciplinary activities. And I think we just need to acknowledge that. And I'd like to make the case that as the regents discuss the metrics in the future and reviewing the progress that we've made, that in every case, it ought to be accompanied by some kind of a presentation from the university to help contextualize what the numbers look like and not simply be the numbers themselves. Chad, I think you've got the executive summary that might be useful to have as backdrop. I know the regents all have that in their materials, but having it up on the screen might be useful. So the first of the areas is engineering. Our overall goal with engineering is multifaceted. One, part of it is to make sure that we are providing an engineering education that will have an impact on the students' lives. That they'll emerge with a high quality degree that will allow them to get a good job, to contribute to the advancement of whatever field that they're moving into in engineering. And another is that the engineering program as a whole, for numbers of degrees and the research that's being done, contributes to the economic development, particularly of Arizona, and helps to diversify the economy in Arizona. So those things are not in conflict with one another, but they are somewhat different goals. The measurement of degrees, which is the first one on the list, is clearly a measurement of scale, and scale is important in being able to accomplish the things that we're trying to accomplish with our engineering programs. But scale alone is not what we're after. We also know that we need to have a cost-efficient program, because otherwise we can't make it affordable to students. And we also need a program that's of very high quality. The 1.4 item that's up on the list, the research expenditures, has elements of both scale and impact as well as quality associated with them. Clearly, the larger the research expenditures, the more likely there will be startups spinning out of engineering, that there will be businesses that will be supported by academic programs that are at ASU. But also, I think one needs to recognize that research expenditures are garnered by a university as a result of competitive processes largely at the federal level, but also at the foundation level. And that without a high quality program and faculty members submitting high quality proposals, they will not be funded. So if the research is growing at the university, it's an indication of the quality of the university. Other quality measures are harder in our view at ASU to measure. Rankings we have talked about with the board staff. And rankings are interesting, but many of the rankings that are out there use the level of investment that's made in the program as a measure of quality. That's something that ASU has never accepted as being an appropriate way to measure quality. Just because you spend more doesn't mean you're doing better. And certainly it means it's harder for you to provide an affordable program for your students. And so, in general, ASU tends not to do as well on the traditional metrics that come out of things like U.S. News and World Report as we would like, and a lot of it has to do with the way in which they define quality. Citations have also been talked about as a possibility. At least in my view, it's a pretty esoteric way of measuring quality, and it's limited in some ways to what happens within research exchanges between faculty members. That's not always the case, but it is often the case. And so it's not in our minds, at least, that's probably not one of the best measures to use as a metric. I think we'll continue the conversation with the board staff and with regents about how to find quality metrics. Some possibilities are, for example, the number of NSF career awards that are being awarded to our faculty. That's something which ASU tends to do very well. And there's a highly competitive process to get faculty members to receive these career awards. The engineering schools had 42 in the last 5 years and 13 just in the last year. That's an extremely good number. And it may be that we can talk about that as being one of the measures of quality. Other things that we'll continue to talk about would be, for example, number of National Academy and other other faculty that are appointed to groups of that sort. Harder to make a prediction as to what those are, even though it's always a goal of ours to accomplish that. And then another possibility would be the ability of ASU to attract a large federally funded center or two. We've competed repeatedly over the years. We've come very close. We haven't achieved that yet. Again, it would be hard for me to say I predict that in 2022 we will get one, but I think we can recognize that is a measure of quality and one which we are pursuing that we can report on annually. Second category is the ASU as an engine of social mobility that's shown here. This is one where there's clearly an overlap of the efforts that ASU has in this regard with U of A and NAU. We're all seeking to provide an education for as many Pell Grant eligible students as possible and to have them as successful as possible. And so it's a very important thing to measure, but I would not try to pretend that ASU is the only one that's interested in this kind of thing. Similarly, I think the demographic diversity of resident students is another one which is important to all three of the universities, and all of us are making progress in making sure that our freshman classes and our transfer classes are representative of the diversity that we have within Arizona, and that as a result of that, you can demonstrate you're not leaving people out of the possibility of getting higher education. So we definitely, again, think that it's a good idea to measure those and to have and to have forecasts in that area, but probably not exclusively to ASU. The third one on the list of numbers of learners engaged is probably a little bit more oriented towards stated goals that ASU has. As we are looking towards the future, increasingly we are looking through our learning enterprises operation at programs that go beyond the standard degree programs, both immersion and online, that have been the bulk of our students up until now. That would include things like certificates, pathway programs, the number of K-12 students that are engaged either through ASU Prep Digital or through other kinds of programs that ASU would offer. I think it's also important to us to do things as simple as more and more programs like Ask a Biologist that engages students occasionally to be able to be in touch with university faculty members, but there's no formal program associated with enrolling in it or that kind of thing. The numbers of people we can encourage to use our library resources, all of those are things that are measurements of learners, although we don't yet have a definition exactly of how to count those. And I think that's one of the major efforts that we'll go through with board staff and with regents over the course of the next month or so, to find out a way to actually come up with a definition as to what that ought to be, and then make some projections as to how we can expand those numbers over the years. One difficulty, of course, with that is that there really will be no comparable data nationally to look at to say, how's ASU doing in comparison to other places? At least for now, I don't think we know of any way in which those numbers are measured nationally to be able to have comparability. But we can certainly look at trajectories. Then the third area that's been identified is ASU as an interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary center of research and teaching. Again, this is also very much in the DNA of the ASU that has been designed. It's been one of the design imperatives that President Crow put on the table right from the first day that he was the president of the university, and it's something which we've worked at very hard to expand. Again, not exclusively to ASU, but I think it's something which we can point to as being an ASU initiative that's valid as an institutional metric. This is another one that's hard to come up with measures, particularly measures that have comparable data with other institutions. The NSF in its HERD surveys, which is the source of our overall research expenditure numbers that are used in the larger metrics, includes a subcategory of interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary expenditures. So those are reported nationally, and those we can compare nationally. When I look at the definition, I'm not sure that I can be confident that every university categorizes its research in that same fashion as we would do it for that category. So I think we'll have to watch over the years as to what those numbers look like and how they compare and how they change to know whether or not that national comparison is particularly valid. But certainly this is something which we would be aiming for ASU to be increasing over the years. And so therefore, once again, trajectory maybe is an important measure here. The second item here is the research impact of signature initiatives. Global Futures Laboratory that President Crow talked about earlier in the Finance Committee meeting, the Biodesign Institute, which has been going on, which has been growing and building since almost the first day of his presidency, the Mayo Clinical Partnership, which is something which we've talked about for some time, and I think now is finally is starting to show some real numerical strength to it. All of those things, we can measure the research volume in those activities. We can measure the number of faculty that are involved in those programs, although the numbers of faculty, I think, are something which isn't necessarily the best measure, because people can be identified as being part of the biodesign or associated with the Biodesign Institute without necessarily having a lot of activity associated with that. So research activity is probably the best measure for these things. I will say that the way in which we gather information within the university for measuring the progress being made in different ways is that a faculty member who is in engineering, for example, will have his or her research counted within the engineering number that we talked about as one of the first metrics here. If that faculty member is also associated with the Global Futures Laboratory, for example, doing work on something which is advancing a device or something for measurement of issues related to climate change, that research will also will be counted as being Global Futures Research Laboratory activity. And so when we're reporting it, there will be overlaps of what we're reporting in engineering, for example, and what we're reporting for Global Futures Lab for biodesign, for these kind of areas. We don't duplicate when we report totals, of course. The numbers only get reported once in the totals that you see in the larger overall metrics. But that's just context that'll be necessary in looking at the numbers as we go forward with these institutional metrics. In this area, I think in particular, being able to present these numbers with some kind of actual textual presentation is going to be important for regions to be able to get a full flavor of what's going on with interdisciplinary activity. Simply looking at these numbers will be indicative of progress, but I don't think will help people to truly understand all of the important aspects of why interdisciplinarity is important and how it affects the lives of students. The last item on here is technology transfer. And I think as we've talked about it with board staff, this is not really a measure of interdisciplinarity because technology transfer comes out of both interdisciplinary programs and regular research programs at the university. We already report licenses as being part of the overall university metrics. If additional measures are desired in the area of technology transfer, we can report about them, simple things that are coming out of just interdisciplinary centers if that's decided to be useful. There was discussion in this arena of whether or not revenue from licenses should be a measure that we use in this area. ASU has consistently over the years when we've talked about metrics been reluctant to use that as a measure because the nature of how we go about doing technology transfer tends not to emphasize upfront payments for licenses, but rather to either to have equity shares in the companies that are licensing as a means of getting it into the hands of companies that are probably most likely to take advantage of it, and companies that have to make big payments may be too big to be able to use the technology usefully immediately. It also provides the opportunity for the university to have substantial benefits if one or any of these technologies really hit with a new company. And so the numbers of licenses, the number of startups, we think is probably the best measure that the regions can look at for the purposes of evaluating technology transfer. And with that, I'll stop and ask if there are any questions.
So are there any questions or comments for Rich regarding I see Chair Penley.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Rich, this is really, I think, as tough as the choice is and as tough as the measures are, I think this is a real step forward. For more than 2 decades, this board has focused on differentiating these 3 universities, the 3 public universities in our state, to really serve better the state of Arizona and its citizens. What you're doing here, admittedly, despite how difficult it is, and in some sense, as you have pointed out, has overlapping impact on the other 2 universities. Nonetheless, these 3 areas call out areas that President Crow and others at ASU have really highlighted over the years as very central to Arizona State University. recognizing the complexity of that university or frankly, any one of the other two for which we're responsible in the state of Arizona. But I laud the progress that we're making. I think this brings attention and additional attention to very significant aspects of what ASU is all about. So thanks for all the effort. And a thanks as well to Regents Manson and Duvall, and especially to Chad Manson and Helen and George and the other members of the ABOR staff who've worked so hard with you and the other universities to really get to a point that we have these metrics. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and I do want to echo the thanks to staff and to ASU. We've had very productive conversations about this and have made great progress towards, this first iteration of institutional metrics. And I'm very appreciative of the work that's gone into this. It's taken some long discussions and some hard discussions, but it's been very, very worthwhile. I also want to echo Rich's comments regarding looking at metrics within the context of the activity that creates them. Numbers are good, but understanding why a number is a number, what the level is, and what the trajectory is also incredibly important. So I would echo the importance of looking at these in context when we review them going forward, both the institutional and the enterprise-wide metrics. With that, I really appreciate the comments and suggestions. And Chad, can you kind of tell us where we go from here with the ASU metrics?
Absolutely, Chair. We will be getting, in fact, I think Debbie from our office is already trying to arrange further discussions with Provost Searle and Provost Gonzalez and Rich and Maria and Christian to get back in touch with board staff, try and resolve some of the TBDs that are in this document right now. And then we'll be back in touch with the Regents Task Force and hopefully bringing this forward at the next academic affairs meeting more solidified and ready to go. If not, it will come in May. That's the timeline we're working. It's just a matter of whether we can hit that timeline. Chair.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Regent Rusk, you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Regent Manson. I echo many of the same sentiments from Regent Manson and Regent Penley in terms of how important these metrics are for progress. I have one question that will echo essentially what I asked U of A in regards to the second column there. When we're looking at recruiting diverse students, I'm concerned that this metric doesn't do enough to capture the requirement that we're also attaining those students. I made the same comment towards U of A. So I want us to, while we are looking at increasing the demographic diversity of our recruits, we also have to be looking at how we're able to attain those same students. So I feel like that metric is incomplete without a factor of how we are also attaining those students.
I agree entirely with that comment. It's recognized in the first bullet related to Pell Grant students that the graduation rates ought to be as close to the overall graduation rates as possible. The same thing should be said for the second one related to the diversity of students. Many of those students, there'll be overlaps between Pell students and the diversity of the population, but not a perfect overlap, certainly.
Yeah, I think that's it's an important distinction. At the same time, we do have an issue with students who are unable to complete FAFSA in Arizona. That's an item that the board has talked about several times. And so while there is overlap, there is also a significant amount of students who aren't under the Pell Grant, but do fit into that second label. So making sure that we're capturing all the students, we're not having students fall between the cracks, I think is an important item for the board to consider when we're looking at these metrics.
Thank you. Chad, did you have a comment?
I would, with your permission, Chairman, just to respond to Regent Russ' comment, I think everybody is here at the board office agrees as well that it's not just enrollment, but it's actually completion is most important. We set these metrics on 3-year time frames, and we're realizing that would not want to put any of the universities with regard to this on the hook for a target that they haven't been focused on. Now, if ASU is willing to agree to add an additional metric to this, as well as U of A, and I imagine NAU will have something similar, we can look to putting the completion, an additional completion metric to this. What we've talked about internally is adding that as the time goes on, because the first step to take is to actually ensure that the students are enrolling. The second is then to make sure they're completing. And so that is why we've chosen it. We're happy to discuss that further with Regent Russ, with the Regents Task Force, and with the universities, and adding that in the future and seeing if it makes sense.
Great, thank you.
All right. Thank you all very much. I appreciate the conversation. At this point, we are going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the discussion of financial aid from all strategies from all three universities. Chad, the provosts, and the vice president of enrollment, I believe, are all present and will be providing us with information on these topics. Chad, can you guide us through this, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair Manson. As Chair Manson mentioned in her beginning comments about this committee meeting, in November, the board each year adopts its financial aid report, and the board has that in its possession. Part of that report is to answer specific requirements required by Arizona law. Part of that is to give the board additional insight as part of its fiduciary role to set tuition and to ensure attainment in the state's public universities. We have traditionally treated this conversation as a first step, or one of the preliminary steps in the tuition setting process. And the purpose of today's discussion is to bring forth the enrollment managers and the financial aid leads, along with the provost and the president, should they want to contribute, and have that initial discussion with the committee. At this time, we'll proceed as follows. We're going to have University of Arizona take the lead, and we have Casey Ukeres here to talk. She'll give about 5 minutes of presentation or discussion, and then have the board respond and ask any questions, and then we'll move on to ASU, followed by NAU to finish the discussion. And at the end of that, we'll have a little more time for board questions and comments, and we'll talk about where we go from here. So, Casey.
Thank you all. Thank you, Chad, and thank you, Regents, for having us here today to talk about financial aid. It's such an important part of what we do. And for the University of Arizona, our financial aid strategy is designed to meet our enrollment goals while also maintaining that commitment we have to our land grant mission. And we really focus on 4 areas: recruiting an increasingly diverse and academically prepared new class each year, providing access and affordability for our Arizona residents, supporting retention and on-time degree completion, and meeting institutional revenue goals. And we know that there's some sacrifices that have been made there as we are working on our strategic plan and those strategic priorities related to the other 3 that I mentioned. So the changes that have been made with our merit and financial aid programs you'll see over the last 4 years might look a little drastic. You might recall that we actively worked to lower our discount rate in previous university leadership, and we had lowered that from the low 30s to the low 20s, and that hurt us in enrollment, hurt us in retention and degree completion. And so, we've talked about that at previous meetings, but I think that's always an important context to bring back, because the move up looks more significant than it might have been. As President Robbins settled into his role and we worked on the strategic plan and implemented that, we focused on really enrolling that diverse and academically prepared class in different ways than what we had done before. And as part of that, that's how our new institutional metrics are also built for Goal 1 that we have just heard from ASU about. So I'm really happy to share that the work that we've been doing is paying off, and we're seeing that our strategy is working in order to meet those goals. In fall 2020, even through a pandemic year, we brought in one of our most academically talented classes we've ever brought in, and it was our most ethnically diverse class that we had ever brought in the history of the University of Arizona. And we have been able to see those consistent increases in the academic profile of our incoming class. And in the fall of 2020, for that fall 19 class, we hit our highest retention rate ever. We've also seen increases in our graduation rates, our 4-year graduation rates. It's a 7.4 percentage points that we were able to see from the 2012 to 16 class, so those graduating in 2020. So we're really proud of that and know that we need to do those kinds of things to be able to advance the degree completion. One example for the incoming class, just to give you an idea, our students that are coming in with a 3.75 and higher from high school in their core GPA. In 2018, we brought in 31.8% students with that criteria, and in 2020 it was 43.5. So we are seeing the quality of that academic class continue to increase, as well as the diversity of the class. And we are tracking very closely our first gen and Pell students as well. Now there's other strategic initiatives that are going on. It's not all aid programs that are supporting those retention efforts and degree completion, but we also know from the research we've done and the data we've collected is that students that have that financial support are persisting at much higher levels. And so we're using that multifaceted approach at the university to be able to continue to increase the number of students who are retained and graduating from our institution, particularly focusing on our Arizona residents, where we want to continue to grow that number and help to meet those Achieve 60 AZ goals as well. So of course, it's important to remember, and I know we talk about this each time any of us from the universities talk, that many of our meritorious students also have financial need. And so for our residents, we implemented the Pell Pledge program that just started for fall 2020. And that's for Arizona residents who are Pell eligible, but they're eligible now for tuition free at the University of Arizona. They still pay fees, but their tuition is free. And many of these students already had scholarships, either from us or from outside, that covered most of the tuition in addition to their Pell. But what it did was really help students to see that future and that path with us and the opportunity to enroll at the university. And last year, when FAFSA filers were down across the state of Arizona, we were able to see our Pell numbers increase for our resident class by 5%. So where do we go from here? Can we keep doing what we're doing? Well, we think about that a lot. And so we're thinking about the future, the sustainability, and student success. And so we've implemented a committee, the Admissions, Merit Aid, and Outcomes Advisory Committee. And this group is really focused on looking at student success, as well as the programs that we're offering in terms of aid and those outcomes of the students. Because again, getting students through their college and to the degree completion is our #1 goal. And so the committee is made up of cross-campus representatives and is analyzing the impact of things like use of test scores, rigorous coursework, GPAs, course deficiencies, merit aid, and of course, how that all balances with institutional cost. So that's really the focus of that. And the recommendations from that committee are going to be back in February. And then from that, we will take that information to be able to set plans for academic year 22, 23, and beyond. But there's a really dedicated focus to that sustainability, the financial piece of it, as well as the outcomes piece for our students. And this work group, as well as a few other groups on campus, are very connected with the Financial Sustainability Task Force and Enrollment Management. So we're all working in this together and in conjunction, where I'm part of most all of these groups, so that we can really not only understand the impact on the students, but the finances of the institution, because we know that we need to balance those things, and that's a key part of the work that we're doing. So that's just a little bit about our strategy, where we've been, kind of where we're going, and look forward to having more discussions about that in the future. And I'll pause there to answer any questions that you have for Arizona.
Thank you, Casey. Does anybody have I see Regent Ridenour has his hand up.
So question, I know the foundation undertook a fairly large fundraising goal, I think for Pell eligible students to give them financial aid. Could you comment on what the private sector is providing help-wise to meet these goals, and really where is money coming from to make a difference in the financial aid? I know it's not coming from the state, so.
Right, no, we have Dr. Robbins, our provost folks, and probably share some additional details, but we have had successful fundraising years, even in this downturn of the situations that we're in. And so I've been working with a number of donors in addition to the work that's happening with the foundation in conjunction with them, because there's a lot that want to give. And so we've been continuously growing funds for the Arizona Assurance Program that really provides that full comprehensive opportunity for students to come without any loans, as well as the Pell Pledge program. And then the Wildcat Journey, there's a whole focus on the Wildcat Journey in our strategic plan, where the development officers are dedicated to doing that work, to finding any funds that are possible to bring in. And so we're really trying to offset what we're providing to students through the donor support. And that's something that the community has really gotten around, because they see that as part of our full strategic plan, and they've seen the increases that we've made in the academic quality of the class coming in.
Thank you, Casey. I will just make a comment, and I think this is going to be pertinent to all three schools, is that, I think one of the things that the regents are very interested in is the sustainability of the increases in the discount rates over the years. Casey, you mentioned that there was a push to decrease U of A's discount rate, and so the increase may look somewhat dramatic, but there is a trend over time that these discount rates have been increasing, and unless you are providing, as Regent Reinauer mentioned, external funds to do that, that is a significant difficulty in sustainability for the institution. So I'd be very interested to hear kind of the outcome of the report in February regarding how that looks for the U of A in particular.
Absolutely. Yeah, we look forward to reviewing all the results and sharing those as well. I think it's a critical thing for us to look at as we look across the country. We're seeing that both privates and publics are increasing their discount rate, lowering their net tuition revenue that's coming in because the competition is so fierce. And so knowing that we want to keep our top students in the state and support them through the process, it has been a costly endeavor, but we are looking at how we can balance that out as a whole through the report that we're doing, and really making sure that we are serving the students that need it most, and we're applying financial aid appropriately to the right students in order to meet our goals on both sides. Thank you, I appreciate that. The race to zero doesn't benefit anybody.
Any further comments for questions for U of A? Okay, Chad, who is next?
Next is Kent Hopkins, will be speaking for ASU.
Perfect.
Thank you, Chad, and thank you, Regent Manson. I'd really actually like to go back and let us focus on the conversation that Regent Rusk, Rich Stanley, and Chad had regarding Pell Grant and need students and how that applies to the university metrics. That was this discussion that we're having with you on aid policies. So Regent Rusk, it's an honor and a pleasure to have you be part of this Regent group. You keep us very focused. And Chad has asked me to talk about 4 components in Regent Manson. I'm going to start with the one that you just brought up for the U of A, and that's assessing merit and need assistance. And what are we doing in that arena? So in the fall of 2019, we have similar committees to what my friend and colleague Casey shared with you. And so our working group financials came to the enrollment team and said, we've got to reduce expenditures in merit assistance while increasing enrollment. That's a big challenge. So in 2019, we analyzed behavior of enrollment by academic ability level, those types of measures. And we made the concerted effort of reducing aid to some student groups in 2019. We expanded that in 2020. So the aid report, the financial aid report, and I just need to ground everybody in this, that aid report is for academic year 19 and 20, so last year. So you're seeing the effects of merit assistant on all of our students. Just want you to be mindful that we think about this every day and we take those steps. So Regent Manson, I really appreciate your focus on that. Chad asked about institutional aid increasing since 2016. Yes, it has. But I can also tell you that during that time period at ASU, we increased enrollment 36,461 students. Well, that's an increase of about 41.6% in terms of aid recipients only. And within aid recipients only, we increased Pell Grant recipients by 45%. And so my boss and my soon-to-be boss keep us very grounded in our institutional commitment to Arizona citizens. And so we have academic programs and financial programs that help meet, if you will, the gap to tuition. So students who bring Pell Grants with them, the institution makes a commitment in need-based assistance and sometimes merit-based assistance to, if you will, fill the gap at least to tuition assistance. So that I think that is extremely important. Second is that whole monitoring expenditures, but you've got to tie expenditures meeting, whereas Morgan Olson, he's not here right now, is meeting those institutional revenue objectives for the university. So if we're meeting those objectives while monitoring our aid expenditures, those two have to be particularly aligned. We think that that's an important point to move forward. And it was a pleasure listening to Rich in this session because the metrics, financial aid policies is a subset, an important subset of the university metrics. The third is students paying zero tuition. And Chad and I have talked about this before, and it's some of the definition of the financial aid report that may need to be modified. So we have about 900 international students who show up in the financial aid report as paying zero tuition. Well, they don't pay the tuition, their country does. They're sponsored students. The university receives the investment from those countries. So the student's not, technically the student is paying zero tuition, but the country is making a commitment in those students. Also, there are third-party scholarship providers that students will show up in those particular categories that show zero tuition. And the student's actually receiving assistance from another party. And yes, our students paying zero tuition is really driven by our Pell Grant students. The fourth area, Chad asked, yep.
Can I ask just a brief question?
Absolutely. It's your meeting. It's your meeting.
If somebody has a Flynn scholarship, do they show up as a zero tuition student?
They would, but remember, that's just tuition. Flynn
right.
And the three universities go well past that to meet the cost of attendance and then some for those particular students.
Okay, is there I mean, I don't know how big those numbers are. If you're talking about 900 international students and then, Flynn's is a nominal number, but it would be interesting to know because that skews your data.
We can certainly work with Chad and his team and categorize those groups for you. So you have a better understanding. Again, for ASU, it's the investment in our in-state students to help them. And, morally, tuition sometimes isn't enough,
right,
for our needy students. That's what we can do for some of our students. For our Obama students, we go past with room and board, books and supplies, etc.
Okay.
And
Thank
so
you.
Yep, absolutely. And so the fourth point, the board has heard financial aid programs serve two objectives, is to ensure that means is not a barrier to qualified candidates entering and completing higher education. Amen. We have to stay very focused on our Arizona citizenry and help students who meet our admission standards, who have the highest need, not feel like finances is a stress point. It's clear. At the same time, we need to recruit and retain, that's an overused phrase, our best and brightest students. So those students who, well, they're two regions here right now, is to keep those students here and engaged in Arizona. Regent Manson, the Flynn program is one of those. It's small. Our honors colleges do that as well. And then I just want to make one last point before I chew up my 5 minutes. I always want to remind everybody that there are students behind these figures. And the students bring individual stories to the table. So we can categorize all this information for you. But again, I appreciate what Regent Russ talked about. It's not only the enrollment, but it's the retention, persistence, progression, and degree attainment. I'll just share a little brief story with you. Last night, we get a note from our Fulton Schools of Engineering. They're looking at their first-year students who joined us in the fall. 20 students they believe need attention as it relates to finances. And I've got Missy Pizzo on the Zoom call with me. She will work not only with the Fulton schools and those 20 students, but if she needs to, she'll call every one of those 20 students and their families. So that's what we have to do to make this work. And we're trying to do that for 130,000 students at Arizona State University. Thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Just a small task there, Ken. Are there any questions or comments for ASU regarding financial aid? So same comment from me that the sustainability question is fundamental to this. So as we get data, it would be really helpful to see that specifically.
Well, Regent Manson, let me tell you, we're in the heart of spring, right? We're actually in our 3rd week and 4th day of the spring semester. We welcomed 2,528 new undergraduate students to our campuses, centers, and locations. That's an increase of 110 students. And then for our master's and professional programs, new students, we have 1,381. That's an increase of 570 students. So many of those master students, Regent Manson, were deferred from the fall semester because they could not get here. Many of those students are international students, and now they're here with us.
Thank you. Okay, so I think now we move on to, I'm guessing, Annika from NAU.
Yes, thank you, Regent Manson, and all for joining. It's been exciting for Kent, Casey, and I to meet regularly and discuss kind of what's happening in the here and now. As Kent mentioned, the report goes back to the last academic year. The goals of our financial aid policy here at NAU are success and access. And on those two specific things, we've done quite well in recent years with retention consistently increasing, graduation rates 4 and 6 years increasing, and then access this last fall, despite all the challenges all of us have faced in so many different aspects of our work and personal lives, we saw an increase of students of color across the board here at NAU, and we're quite proud of that. Our Arizona students do pay less tuition and mandatory fees than in previous cycles. We met a greater percentage of that need through our financial aid policies. And I think you've heard from my two colleagues as well, it's all about the push-pull of the different levers to maximize diversity and access, to maximize revenue, to maximize enrollment, to lower the discount rate. All of those things have push and pull levers. And so as we've learned some lessons in trying different things, you heard Casey speak of lowering discount rate, and that hurt the enrollment picture. So it's about balance in all of those things. And we have here at NAU really spotlighted and paid attention to that success piece and making sure students can persist through their degree programs and graduate. We also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that financial aid programs are a multi-year commitment. Unlike some other institutions, we don't make a commitment in year 1 and hope for the best for years 2 through 4 or 5 or 6. That we really have to think of these things in a long-term way, which makes it even more challenging. It's really the intersection of the right mix of programs and your place in the market, and then how you provide aid to those students that are applying and committing to you. I would also like to mention that Pell tells us that students are very needy, but just beyond Pell, those students are needy as well. And similar to Kent, last night I had the pleasure of speaking with about 300 parents on a parent chat that we did. And we asked those parents beforehand, what are your questions? And then in the chat as well, a lot of questions beforehand about my 2019 taxes look completely different than my reality today. And so we're consistently refining the edges for each individual student, as Kent mentioned as well. And so really looking ahead to sustainability, we absolutely need to pay attention to our individual student stories and making sure that as we at NAU are working alongside the board, which we're really excited about, to realign those metrics, as well as research and some deep dive committees similar to my colleagues as well, coming together here as we're looking for for incoming class year 22, that looking at that horizon, there are things that are also happening at the federal government level in terms of free college that we need to pay attention to, and what that means, whether at the community college level or at the four-year institution level, what that's going to mean for us. Debt forgiveness and what that means. We have seen loan adverseness in our population, and the report certainly highlights that. The amount of debt our students have at graduation has declined over the last couple of years, which is typical. Students don't want to take that debt out, and that goes to the higher conversation about the value of a college degree that we're having across the country daily, and the chronicle inside higher education that I know Casey, Kent, and myself often, probably are up a lot of late nights thinking about. Another indication as we're looking ahead and considering financial aid policies and that sustainability and that discount rate, as Casey mentioned, that has continuously risen across the country. This week, we have seen 26% increase in our FAFSA filers for next year. So that bucks the national trend, but which is all well and good, but that tells me that students and parents are struggling. They see the value in higher education. They've gone through lots of work filling out that FAFSA, and they want it. And so how are we going to continue to meet those needs? Again, circling back to our guiding light principles of success and access. Happy to stop there and entertain any questions.
So any questions from the regents for NAU? Regent Duvall?
Thank you. And actually, Annika got to it at the end, but I won't take up time in the meeting. But short of what we most need, which is a state promise program, we need state financial aid. It is the single most important thing I think we could do here. But short of that, this performance around FAFSA is really an opportunity, particularly if the Congress increases the Pell amounts, which seems possible. So offline, would just ask the three leaders in this sector if you have any ideas as to where the board, as a matter of policy, legislation, or PR, can assist in your FAFSA application strategies, please bring them to our attention. This could be a significantly rapid way for us to improve the dynamics of the stresses that have been articulated.
Thanks for that comment, and I'll certainly defer to my colleagues to comment further. The three of us put our heads together on this FAFSA completion and applications for our rural communities. We were seeing some depression there in the late fall, and so the three of us put our heads together and are getting ready to launch a Tri-U campaign to do just that. And I'm excited because we're really working together. We're here as your three state institutions to help you earn a degree. It's not about, in this campaign, being a lumberjack, a wildcat, or a sun devil. It's about, let's make it happen for our really most needy, in some cases, rural communities. And make them understand and help them understand that we're still here. The deadlines fall, typical application time. We're pivoting and changing and adapting right along with you, and we're still here for you. So Casey or Kent, anything to add on that?
Thanks, Annika. And yeah, I think that that's a really important thing, is that we are all working together and having this tri-university effort. When our teams came together to do virtual sessions on admission and financial aid in the fall, I mean, I think there was 10,000 registrants. I mean, it was incredible, the number of individuals that were signing up to attend our sessions and hear from all three of us. And I think the other exciting thing is the campaign that Annika was talking about. It will launch on February 1st, and everything from editorials that are in our op-eds that are in rural newspapers to tribal radio spots, to really be able to show our connection as a state and public universities, and that we're here for you.
The 3 points to you, Regent Duvall. Missy, monitor this. Now, number one is, I believe 84% of our first year students in state and transfer students already submit the FAFSA. So I want you to be aware of that. I would say it's an and. Second, we have high school students who are university ready who don't enroll anywhere. We've got to connect with those students. We've got to help them understand the value for education. So that's extremely important. And then number three, Regent Duvall, I would say in tandem with FAFSA completion, and it goes to the students who are university ready, many students aren't. And so in our partnership program that we call Project Sunrise with the Phoenix Union High School District, it would really be incumbent for all three universities to work with our high school communities so that when ninth graders are raising their hand to say, I want to go to university, I see the transformative power, we have to help them as early as the first year in high school when a student may fall off track in math or science to get back on track. We've got to get more students, more of our citizens university ready.
Thank you. Those are great points. Just out of curiosity, are ASU and U of A both seeing the increase in FAFSA completions that NAU recently did?
We are not at the level that NAU has. So I don't know if Annika is going out and getting all of her continuing students to increase FAFSA submittal.
I just said it's snowing. Come on in and fill out a FAFSA.
You've nothing better to do, right?
We were seeing increases last time I looked. I don't know if Art has any more updated stats, but we were up as well. I don't know if at the same level though.
Okay. Well, thank you guys. Thank you very much. And thank you, Regent Duvall. That's a very good point. Are there any additional questions that the board would like to ask at this point?
Can I just mention one other thing?
Okay.
I just wanted to also mention that in working with Chad, the three universities have been pushing to through ABOR to be able to ask the high schools for earlier information about their students. And so this year, the letter that went out is asking superintendents through their high schools to send us data for freshman year, first year students all the way through, so that we're able to start that outreach much earlier as a whole.
Perfect. Thank you, Casey. Regent Ridenour.
So maybe this question goes to Chad. So each year, Chad, we go through this exercise of financial aid. And by the way, it's very encouraging to hear from the three universities about access and retention and completion. My question, Chad, is how does this all tie into the tuition setting? I know it should, but I'm not so sure it does anymore. And in other words, we have these financial aid requirements. We also have the push-pull of tuition, which is where we're getting a lot of our money for the financial aid. So the big picture is, how are you tying all this together so that it makes something meaningful for the Board of Regents as we look at tuition with a financial aid background?
Chair Manson, Regent Ridenour, that's an excellent question, and one that pinpointed a weakness and maybe how we've done some this over the years. We've actually been working with Director Arnold and with Lorenzo Martinez and his team, who bring the tuition setting process to you, to do a better job of integrating this. And that's specifically why we've designed these conversations the way we have this year and tried to do it last year. I think it's been done a little bit better this year. If I may, when the state asks an individual to take on the mantle of a regent, they give them 3 fiduciary responsibilities. They require you to be the fiduciary for the state and its peoples when it comes to higher ed. They also require you to be the fiduciary for the enterprise as a whole, for the system, and make sure all 3 institutions are strong. And then they require you to be the individual fiduciary for each institution. And there's some elegance and sophistication in that, but it also does lead to some conflict in this area where you are trying to adhere to the promise that you all adopted last fall, put forth by Regent Duvall, to make COSTA's reducing cost and adhere to the constitutional mandate, while at the same time making sure your institutions are strong financially, and that they, when they recruit the best and the brightest students, they don't engage in an arms race that puts them at financial risk with regard to scholarships. We are trying to do a better job of highlighting the conflicts for the regents, allowing them to engage with the senior university leaders on where those conflicts exist and how do you resolve those conflicts as you look at their tuition proposals, in addition to just the financial aid given out to students. So I'm not sure I answered your question fully, Regent Ridenauer, other than we are trying to put forth reporting structures and discussion structures so the regents know when they're talking about financial aid and when they're talking about tuition requests, exactly the impact it has on the institutions and the students they serve.
Thank you, Chad. All right, unless there are other comments or questions, this was a discussion item. I really appreciate everybody's input. We're moving forward. Accessibility and success are, the key components of this, and financial aid is a significant moderator in that. At this point, we'll move on to the final item on our agenda, which is the request for a new academic program from the University of Arizona. And I am going to turn the floor over to Provost Folks. You're on mute, Liesl.
Of course I'm on mute. Thank you very much, and thank you, Regents, for your consideration of this new program proposal, which is a Master of Arts degree in Philosophy, Politics, and Economics. We already have a very successful undergraduate degree in this area. This master's program is a natural extension of that training program. There are 2 primary pathways in this proposal. One is an intensive main campus version, and one is an accelerated master's program, which connects to the undergraduate degree I just mentioned, which would be delivered through participating global micro-campus network sites. And just as a matter of background, philosophy, politics, and economics has emerged now as a discipline in its own right very clearly. It has its own national society, and there's large amounts of grant funding support from different agencies. There are now several journals and a number of universities which are listed in the full proposal that offer undergraduate and graduate programs in this area. Indeed, worldwide, there are now 350 PPE undergraduate programs, and about 50 of those are in the United States. But surprisingly, there's something of a paucity of master's degrees in this space, only 7 that we could find in total. The goal of this program is to train people to be placed in the occupational categories of, and of course these sound rather arcane because they're the government prescribed descriptors, but general research, journalism and broadcasting, data analysis and mathematics, and policy analysis and planning. So those job types where the demand is for research methods analysis and excellent communication skills, coupled with deep understanding of public policy and ethical considerations of policy. I should point out that the University of Arizona has the only recognized philosophy, politics, and economics department in the United States, which in our case is called the Department of Political Economy and Moral Sciences, and that is the unit that will be administering this degree. We're very proud of the fact that the current undergraduate cohort that comes to this department are some of the most academically well-prepared students that we admit to the University of Arizona. So it's a highly competitive and attractive degree offering for us. And we believe that this master's degree will add significant reputational advantage to us as an institution. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there questions from the board? Okay, I have a couple, and they're just kind of because I don't understand. What does global flipped mean when you're talking about instructional modality?
Sure, that's a great question. So when we can do, we have the ability, is flipped instruction clear? Or shall I start
there?
Okay,
so you're talking about, okay. No, but Karen's shaking her head, so go.
So flipped instruction is a particular type of engaged pedagogy, engaged learning pedagogy, in which students are expected to do background reading and preparation outside of the classroom. And by the time they come into the classroom, they're expected to engage in active problem solving, often in teams. But absolutely go immediately to applying what they've learned outside the classroom, working alone, working, doing their homework basically. But the time that's spent in the classroom is very active and engaged in application of principles of background of theory. And then the global part of that is our ability now to deliver that at scale across the globe using modern platforms like Zoom.
Okay, so the other question I had was the projected enrollment. So it's relatively small, but can you run, the AMP is obviously the accelerated master's program, which is the in-person.
Yeah.
The intensive MA is the one that's offered at the micro campuses, correct?
The intensive one is the main campus version. The accelerated one is this, where you sign up to do the undergrad and the master's degree together, and that's going through the global network.
And then global is global campuses or?
Through our microcampus network, so yes.
Okay.
So clarify, not UAGC, not UAGC.
Right, that's where I'm.
Microcampuses. Yes.
Okay.
I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you, Regent Manson.
And then why in particular is the global program in Peru in the financials separated out? Is that something significant?
Well, the significance to us is that anytime we do this, we want to start with one site and bring it up at one site, and Peru's our target of opportunity for that initial launch. So it's called out here because that will be our first partner site to do this with.
Okay. Yeah. And then the only other question, or it was a comment, and Regent Penley unfortunately had to leave the meeting early, I believe, because I do not see him on his little square. And he was just wanted to express some concern that UAA isn't using the concepts and competencies for measuring outcomes, that it's more a faculty-driven learning, which is harder to be consistent with across the board. So that was perhaps a conversation that you can have with Regent Penley, but I think there's some concern about just how are we measuring what it is that actually is an outcome.
Very good. I will take that feedback back and certainly connect with Regent Penley on that item.
Okay.
Terrific. Thanks, Regent Manson.
Are there any other questions or comments from the committee? All right. Let me get to the bottom of so this is actually an action item, and I am going to move that the committee forward to the full board for approval the request for a new academic program for the University of Arizona. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? And the motion carries. We are adjourned.